Welcome to Unapologetically AuDHD. I'm Patricia Young, MSW, and I'm an AuDHD former therapist and current coach.
I'm Alex McLaughlin, MSW and LICSW, and I'm an AuDHD therapist. This is a podcast with two friends processing what it's like to live in body-minds that diverge from neuronormative standards, and everything that comes with it, the good, the bad, and the beautifully messy.
We aim to release 2 or more episodes per month. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for help from a licensed mental health practitioner. Hey there. How you doing, Alex?
I'm doing all right. I was telling you before we recorded that my electric kettle stopped working. It was reading my water at, you can adjust the temperature that you want the water at. And whenever you set it in the base, it will tell you what temperature the water currently is. And it was reading the water at 248 degrees. So when I would set it at the temperatures I set it at, nothing was happening. And so, we're starting a little behind. And I mean, I think it threw me a little bit, but I feel like I was in a place to be able to be okay, it's an electric kettle. You found a solution. Yes, it was extra steps. Yes, it was annoying. Yes, it probably took paste points or spoons and it's water. You know what I mean? I had to kind of talk myself through it so I didn't have a meltdown. But
Sure.
If it were a different kind of day, or if I had to jump into sessions today, I probably would have had a mini meltdown because I need my water, I need my coffee, and you were able to be flexible with the fact that I had to take time to try and problem solve and then figure out a different solution. And so, yeah, I'm just, I guess reflecting on that and felt a little discombobulated, but better now and proud of myself for how I managed it.
Yeah, definitely. I often don't even have a clue as to how I'm doing, and then something like that will happen. And then depending on my reaction, I'm like, oh, I'm doing really well today. Or, oh, I didn't think I realized that I was, just on my last straw, and this was the thing that pushed me over, and I had no clue about that.
Yeah, that's that great old alexithymia, interoception challenges.
Yep.
Yeah. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I had a productive morning. I had to go get some blood drawn, fasting blood. It's funny, as soon as I know I can't eat, that's all I obsess about. And I had another test yesterday, and she's like, you can just breathe slowly. You don't have to hold your breath. But as soon as the machine started, it's I felt like I had to take deep breaths. So it's just interesting to see how much of this, as soon as I can or can't do something, then I have a very intense need to do it.
Yeah, PDA coming in hot.
Yep. Big time. So I came home, walked the dogs, cleaned up. Yeah, I'm doing well and ready to get going. I probably should have started with what we're talking about today. This is part 2 of talking about what is autism. And we're going through the DSM criteria and then sharing outside of that what we experience it looks like. So I'm going to let you pick up where we started off, Alex.
Okay. So if you didn't listen to the previous episode, I do encourage folks to do that just because we give context for what the criteria even is, what the DSM. So if you didn't listen to that, I encourage you to go back and listen.
But if you're PDA and you don't want to, don't worry about it.
Yeah. You might just be a little lost. And so, right, that's an informed decision that you're going to make. And maybe not, right, depending on your familiarity with the DSM. Maybe you can jump in midway through. Otherwise, maybe you decide not to. And then you're like, I don't know, I'm lost. I need orientation. And then maybe you look it up. I don't know. You can do what you want with your body. So we left off on criterion A3. So this is differences in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. So some examples are difficulty initiating and developing allistic friendships, and allistic meaning non-autistic. Difficulty maintaining friendships. Difficulty with shared imaginative play, For example, shared group projects that require high reciprocal input or output. That, I guess, is an example that's more high school adult. Difficulty with context shifting. And there are some like notes from Dr. Neff that I can read if need be. But before I continue reading, do we want to talk about how this shows up for us
Yeah.
or how we see showing up for others?
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah,
are you waiting
so
on me?
mhm. That wasn't clear. Patricia, do you want to talk about how this shows up for you?
A demonstration in the failure of the reciprocal nature of relationships.
Needing very clear
Waiting.
context
Yeah.
clues.
Which happened this morning too, that when you texted me to say, hey, I'm going to be late. This is what happened. I'm like, great. And then about the time that you said that you'd be ready, I'm like, I'm assuming you're going to let me know, but I don't know if you meant that then this was the amount of time we were going to be delayed. So I texted you and said, are you going to let me know when you're ready? Because that's what I was assuming, but we never talked about it. But I think this really fits into what we're talking about of implied, implicit communication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I find making friends very easy. It's the maintaining of the relationships. It's very challenging. Yet, I was talking with an autistic colleague the other day who's a therapist, and we were doing some body doubling. And I said, when we were done, do you want to chat or do you need to move on? And they were surprised at my ability to ask for that because of the things that go on for them and their fear of rejection, their RSD. They said that they wouldn't have done that. And so I'm always surprised because there is a part of me that can be very social and likes connecting. But if I feel like I have to manage the other person, or I'm in this new activity and there's this new person that showed up that just talks nonstop, and I feel really overwhelmed and off put by it. So this fear of being overwhelmed comes up for me. And I'm like, I don't want to have anything to do with it. How about you, Alex?
Yeah, I think, I noticed when we kind of first started like our friendship, like you were very upfront and like direct about asking, like, hey, I would love to just like chat outside of, the autistic therapist like space. Like, would you want to do that? And I was like, I think I told you, like, I don't have the balls to ask that. Like, I for sure
Mm-hmm.
wanted to, and I like want to like initiate friendship, but I get very scared. And I think I'm over analyzing like what the norm is. Like, what do they like me? Like, can I tell? Like, is this too soon? Like, I'm like thinking about all the like social norms or rules around that. So for me, I do find that difficult initiating
Mm-hmm.
friendship. I find the maintaining from an executive functioning standpoint, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
From an autistic standpoint, I find that like once I've had contacts with someone, let's say like 4 or 5 times, then I start to feel more comfortable and I feel like I can be more myself and like I'm less kind of anticipating that rejection. And so for me, yeah, it is initiating is hard, and like initiating conversation with a stranger, or like I'm on dating apps, and so like initiating conversation there, I feel so anxious and I'm like, what do I say here? What do people say? Like, is this going to be weird? How are they going to receive this? Like, is this too
Mm-hmm.
direct? Like, because I've also been told that when I'm getting to know someone, I can be intense. I have had people tell me it's like you're interviewing someone for a job. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
grilling them. You're asking them a ton of questions, and I'm like, genuinely, like I do want to know these things about them.
Yeah.
I am very curious, and like, but I'm not reading that like this might be too much first meeting someone.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just want to dive on in. I want to know your trauma. I want to like dive on in. I don't want to do that small talk. I don't do it a little bit, right? But it just that feels very forced to me.
Mm-hmm.
Any reflections at, kind of hearing me say that? Anything coming up for you?
I don't think so, but I feel like I should have something coming up for me, but I don't. How is it for you maintaining friendships? I know you said that the executive functioning part of it makes it harder for you.
I guess I'm curious, like, what? when you say that's hard for you, what are some examples of how that shows up?
Well, it's interesting. You and I were talking before we hit record and trying to decide, was this a neurodivergent thing or was this a trauma thing? That I know somebody and we started doing an activity once a week together and then we had to stop. And then this morning I was thinking, I'm just kind of over it. I think part of it is my ADHD, that I like the novelty of something new and new routines. And then when there's a break, it's hard for me to get back into it. And I was just thinking, I'm kind of over it with this whole friendship thing. Not that like I don't want to be friends, but it just like, let's just let it go. And then we have another activity coming up. And so I connected with this person. We spent 15 minutes on the phone today and made arrangements for what we're doing. And then I hung up and I thought, oh, I kind of like spending time with them. And we had a really nice conversation. So that difficulty for me of holding permanence in my being, that if there's time and space, and probably very, very, very likely that my trauma drives my car, that I'm so expecting for relationships to not work and things to fall apart. And just because of some personal things that have been going on recently, if you listen to my other podcast, Unapologetically Sensitive, I have about 3 episodes where I've been talking about this recently. So that's much more current. So I think a lot of my trauma is more present, but I think I live with this. And I've had relationships end unexpectedly. I've ended a few relationships. My history is I tend to hang in there longer than I need to, but I think sometimes my feelings get so big and I get frustrated and then I just like the relationship just ends. So yeah, maintaining relationships it can be a challenge for me.
Yeah. I hear that. Yeah, I think for me, it's just the like remembering to like check in, the making plans, the remembering to like confirm the plans, the knowing like, okay, when is it been too much time? Like, do I double text? You know what I mean? Like at
Mm-hmm.
this point in life, I don't really care. Like I will just double text because
Mm-hmm.
many of my friends are neurodivergent themselves. And so I think that having that second like nudge is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think as I've gotten older, it's gotten easier as I've just embraced just being authentic and not worrying as much about the like quote unquote social norms.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just the executive functioning of it all. It just can be a lot for me at times. And so it's not that I don't value that connection. It's just right. Like at the end of the day, it's like, oh, I don't have spoons
Yeah.
to reach out or to engage.
I suspect for myself that there are different profiles that we have as autistics. And what I find with clients that I work with that are very similar to me, that for those of us that process very quickly, that are very efficient, that are very centered on time, have a very, I mean, as autistics, we all have a sense of justice sensitivity, but the people that are wired the way that I am, like we have, like, this is the way that things should go, and this is what we expect from people. And without understanding autism or neurodivergence, that when people in friendship stray from how we think things should go, we can have very little tolerance for that. And that
Mm,
also used to be true in my marriage. And it's something that I have to be very mindful about, that I notice and see and process a lot more than my husband does. I remember details that I don't think people remember. I'm not saying I remember everything. And until we learn about our neurodivergence or work with a coach or a counselor, we kind of assume everybody's like us. And when people don't meet our standards, we're like, what the heck is wrong with everybody? And
mm,
I think that's the benefit of diagnoses, of labels, of understanding ourselves and knowing that just because we think and believe and see certain things doesn't mean that everybody else does, or have a certain expectation for communication or getting together or reciprocity. So, like you're saying, having that ability to check in and see how things are going, we have to have that awareness before we can even do that.
yeah, I hear that. And I hear what you're saying around like expectations and like hopes for friendships. And then when that doesn't happen, right? There can be a lot of like disappointment and confusion and then like that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, justice sensitivity. Yeah. And when I said check in, I meant more of like a hey, how's it going? Versus like
Mm, mm-hmm.
how's this feeling
Mm-hmm.
for you? I don't know. I don't really do that in relationships outside of therapy, which is
Mm-hmm.
like, that's probably a good practice to check in with
Mm-hmm.
friends, like how things are feeling. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I have to say on the topic of maintaining. Do you have any other thoughts on the topic?
Well, I think you're going to talk about this, but I think the other thing is that we need to talk about, are we with other neurodivergent people, or are we having relationships with someone who's autistic and someone who's not autistic? Because I think that also changes things. But relationships are just challenging. I mean, I think they're great and I think we need them. I think community is wonderful, but there are so many nuances around things like executive functioning and things that can make relationships challenging. And if you're autistic, you've had trauma. So that adds another layer onto it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think these things were factored in when they were looking at the criteria for autism. And autism shows up so many different ways for so many different people. And for those of us that are later identified, late diagnosed, it's probably going to look very different for us than when they develop the criteria on observable behaviors in children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can't remember if that's something that we talked about in the first episode, but really that is what the DSM is. It's like, how do other people perceive an autistic child,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically like a white male. And so
Right.
it's less about the internal experience and more about how autism impacts the people in the autistic person's life, which is like really kind
Right.
of fucked up. But I forgot the thing you said. Oh, we're probably going to talk about this. And I don't remember what it was that you said that
Oh,
about.
that we're going off of Dr. Megan Neff's autism diagnosis criteria in a visual form. And she talks about that. Oh, I can't find it right now, but what it's saying is that they didn't take into account when they were doing this what relationships look like if you have two autistic people. That,
Mm,
again, we have to look at the conclusions that are drawn and what they were studying and what they were looking at, and that m- more often than not, the criteria is by people that don't have lived experience of these things. And so it's their perception, which is so different than having a lived experience.
yeah. And that triggered a thought to kind of just have a brief sidestep and talk about the double empathy problem.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you feel comfortable defining?
No, thank you.
No. Okay. No, thank you. I'm going to go look it up because I feel like sometimes I misremember. Essentially, it's a theory that explains that communication between non autistic and autistic people, there's like a mismatch, and non autistic people tend to, without even realizing, I think this is subconscious, but they tend to be able to identify if someone's autistic when they're talking to them, and they have trouble understanding an autistic person's kind of like theory of mind or where they're coming from, how they communicate, and then vice versa. So autistic people have trouble understanding neurotypical or non-autistic communication, ways of moving through the world. And so this creates a kind of like mismatch, and oftentimes what happens is the non-autistic person blames the autistic person for the mismatch rather than being like self-reflective about, no, this is between the both of us, like this isn't a you thing, this is a both of us thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, anything you'd want to add to that definition?
I'm not sure if it was specifically with this study, but what I recall reading was that within 12 seconds, a non autistic person can identify that there's something different with someone who's autistic. They may not know that they're autistic, but they can recognize that something is different, and that can impact the communication.
Yes, I think I probably misspoke. That is, I think that's what, and again, I'm kind of going from memory, so I'm probably wrong. But yes, I think that's right. I think it's not that they're autistic, but I think they can tell if something's different. So
Yeah.
yeah, coming back to the criteria, right, is some of these difficulties that are being described is really more to do with between like autistic and non-autistic friendships or relationships. It's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, and like that's not to say that autistic communication can't be right. There can be a mismatch. It doesn't matter what your neurotype is. Like when you're with someone who has a completely different way of moving through the world, communication style, right? Like that might, there still might be a mismatch. So
Mm-hmm.
miscommunication can happen anyways. But yeah, so I guess just to give more context to the differences that they're talking about.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about difficulty with shared imaginative play, shared group projects that require high reciprocal input output?
That question feels very broad.
Well, they say that autistics are not creative, they don't have imagination, that we don't engage in imaginative play.
Hmm. I mean, I think that that can happen. Sometimes what I see is like, I don't know, like if I'm reading a book and the if it's fantasy and it's like so far fetched, it's like I can't I just like this is dumb. This is not real. This could never happen. Like I just can't get into it. Like I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a little bit of like imaginative. Like I think I did
Mm-hmm.
engage in imaginative play, but sometimes like when I was playing Barbies, I just wanted to set up the house. Like I didn't want to like have the back and forth conversation between the Barbies with like a friend. I wanted to spend more time like making things pretty and like set up the house and like you know what I mean? Like so I think a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of this does apply to me or did apply to me. And I yeah, still as an adult, like if I'm reading something that's fantasy that's so far fetched, nope, can't do it.
Yeah, I think it really relates on context that if somebody who doesn't know me wants to do imaginative play or storytelling, but it's out of what I'm familiar or comfortable with, I'm probably not going to be great at it because it's not interesting and it's not familiar. And sort of the same thing with group projects that I often find that the autistics are the ones that are doing the bulk of the work. And you always have people in the group that don't do what they're supposed to do, which is why working as a group isn't great. And even when you and I, Alex, were starting to work on this podcast together, that I have ways of processing that I have to absorb information in a certain way and digest it before I'm able to respond. And so I think that it's less that we don't play well with others. I think that it doesn't honor what our processing is. And if I'm the one that I remember a game that my husband and I used to play is we would look at couples and we would make up stories about them. And relationships are part of a special interest. So that was very easy for me to do. And it was kind of a fun thing. But if you ask me, I think when my kids were little and they would do pretend play, like that was very hard for me. So I think
Mm.
it just depends on, again, who's making the decision on what this looks like and how much control does the individual have over it is going to impact how they participate. But I don't think that that was taken into consideration.
Yeah, that's true. And right, I think also you're bringing up a thought around if it's an area of interest, like we can engage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even if it's imaginative, right? And I think a lot of so I do autism assessments, and one of the tools I use is the MIGDAS. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's essentially like an autism interview. It's like a structured interview. But one of the things that we ask about is like, how are you with topics that are of non-interest to you? And right, a lot of autistic people are like, I can't engage, I check out, like this not interesting, like my focus is not there. It's like pulling teeth. Like it's really painful. It's really kind of hard to
Mm-hmm.
be in those conversations. So I don't know the DSM from the top of my head, and maybe they get into this, but I feel like that kind of maybe applies to this category too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
Yeah. Nope.
Nope. All right, so I want to move on to context shifting after I count my stitches. Two, three, four. Okay, one more. So, yeah, do you feel like you have a good understanding of context shifting and feel comfortable?
A little bit. It's interesting that for my own podcast, I used to do a lot of guest interviews and I don't. And I had somebody that I know very well on as a guest the other day, and we hopped on. And I always do this, and I had to say, sorry, I'm in my tasky brain. Like, I don't do social stuff when I'm doing podcast stuff. And often with guests, the polite thing is to do, hello, how are you? How are you feeling? But I get so focused on the task at hand that I forget about those social skills. And I often find myself when I'm doing this with people, thank goodness for text, because I often will start out a text with exactly what I need. And then I will go back and go, hi, how are you? Just checking in. And I think that's part of switching tasks, that socially we're supposed to remember that you do the introduction, you ask how people are, and then you lead up to what you want, where if I'm focused on something, that's what I'm focused on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
And it can be hard when like that changes or someone has a different need and it's like I feel like I can't let the thing go in my mind because like also I'm afraid I'm going to forget or like I'm going to lose that
Mm-hmm.
momentum. Like if I'm joining a body
Mm-hmm.
double and someone is very chatty, I'm almost like part of me wants to be like I can't. No, I can't. Like I can do like a brief little check-in, but like
Mm-hmm.
but if it's going to be longer than 5 minutes, I like really have to like it's just so hard for me to switch from that to then work mode. And if I'm going
Yeah.
into a body double, I'm kind of already in like work mode.
Yeah.
And I think this can also, I don't know if we've talked about monotropism yet, but which is a concept, it's kind of like a theory in mind of autism that for those of us that are autistic, some of us are more monotropic, meaning like we focus on like one thing and we can really dive deep into that one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be hard for us to then shift out of the thing we're doing because we're so focused on it, like hype, that kind of hyper focus. But yeah, like transitioning from one thing to another takes for any human, right? I don't remember the statistic, but so I'm probably misquoting, but it's like around like 10 minutes, I want to say. I could be wrong, but it takes about
Mm-hmm.
10 minutes for us to shift any human, to shift our brain to a different task or different topic. And
Mm-hmm.
for those of us that are autistic, it tends to take a little bit longer for us to get into a thing. So, like, I think I was saying to you, or maybe it was to another friend, like, actually, yeah, I planned something in the middle of the day. And then I later texted them and I was like, no, I think I need to be in work mode. And like, I just do better with a longer chunk of time to work
Mm-hmm.
on something because it takes me so long to get into it. And then once I'm in it, I don't want to stop because I have
Yep.
that momentum.
Yep. I have that a lot when I'm watching TV and I know the kids are coming home, or I just don't want to have to start and stop. And I've had a couple medical appointments the last couple of days and I brought my book, but I thought if the wait isn't long and by the time it takes me to get into the book, because this is a different genre that I'm reading, that I'm going to feel annoyed, and that's difficult. And I think
Mm,
many of us sit in our car when we finish something before we drive to the next location, or when we get to where we're going, we sit in our car. And I suspect that that's also a way that we help ourselves with that transition time instead of just jumping from one thing to another.
hmm I kind of am having a thought into this moment of I feel like I sometimes have trouble if I'm socially in a conversation, and maybe it's like, I feel like this happens more in like group settings, but maybe we're talking about a topic and then all of a sudden we switch to another topic, but my brain is still on the other topic and there's still
Mm-hmm.
things I want to say. And it
Yeah.
takes me a minute to process and to like let go the things I wanted to say and then to orient to the new thing.
Yes.
You agree?
Yeah. I tend to have a difficult time in groups because I'm not always sure when is an okay time to jump in. And by the time I have my thought formulated or I'm ready to jump in, they're on to something else, and then I don't. And I have to say, it's interesting. I was saying I had a client yesterday, and we were talking about something. The client moved on to something. So I think this isn't just a group thing. And I said I want to go back to what we were just talking about, because sometimes my brain continues to process in the background. And even though the client had moved on, it felt like there was something important about what I needed to say. And so in a one-on-one, it's very easy to jump back to something. But in a group, I feel like that train left the station and it's too late now.
I feel that. I have a really
Yeah.
hard time in groups too for that reason, because I'm like,
Yeah.
can I talk now? Like, and right, people are kind of talking over each other, interrupting. And so I'm like trying to suss out what is the social norm here amongst this
Mm-hmm.
group, and like trying to decide, like, okay, where, well, right, I tried to not interrupt, but I think as I've unmasked my ADHD more, like I do interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and like I try not to, because I know that sometimes when people interrupt me and in the middle of a thought, I lose my train of thought. I can get a little dysregulated.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, groups are hard.
Yeah.
I'll just end it there.
This is a little bit of a side quest, but it's a minor one. When my kids are home, my kids are grown. One of them is married and they'll come and stay for a week or two. So they're part of the family. So the dynamic between just having me and my husband and then the kids here, it's more fun, it's more playful. And I often do more interrupting because my profile is very, very controlled and contained. Like if I drank, I think I'd want to get drunk just so that I could kind of loosen up. I don't want to lose control. But I often will interrupt because I'm relaxed and my ADHD comes out more. And it's funny because I'm not going to call out who it is, but there's one person in our family that calls out my interrupting. And I feel like I'm finally loosening up and you're calling me out on this. Like, are you kidding me?
That's hard.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. I get that. The over controlled, like, yes. Hard
Yeah.
relate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us that have an internalized profile and that are late identified or late diagnosed, that's true, that we figured out what's expected of us, but then learning to let go of that control and to allow ourselves to unmask and be who we are and not monitor is a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else related, unrelated that you want to share before we wrap up? Because this would be a time to take a side quest.
Is there anything you wanted to say related or unrelated?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Where can people find you, Alex, and what do you have to offer these days?
So I have therapy. I offer therapy and autism and ADHD assessments for folks on Wapakoti land, colonized as Minnesota. You can find me at the divergentgrovetherapy.com. I'm also doing an autism burnout group and then like a late diagnosis group. The late diagnosis group is drop in. And then I am opening a coaching, consulting, and training practice. And that's for anyone worldwide. And that is divergentgroveunlearningcollaborative.com. How about you?
Where can people find you for therapy? Did you say, or did I just check out?
I said,
Oh, okay. I checked out.
that's okay.
If you want to reach out to us about the podcast with any questions, you can reach us at unapologetically AuDHD, AuDHD at gmail.com. You can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. I do have a podcast by the same name. I work with late identified, late diagnosed. If you think you might be ADHD, autistic, I do not do evaluations, but we can talk about what you're seeing, and I have a pretty good sense. I work with folks around boundaries, parenting, relationships, work. Really, I think once one realizes that they're autistic, ADHD, neurodivergent, there's this whole process that happens, and really unlearning what you've learned and seeing all the internalized ableism and figuring out who are you, what do you want to create in your life, how do you want to do that. That seems to be a lot of the work that I am helping folks work through. So I think that's all we have. Anything else?
Mm-mm.
All right.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for being here today, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks for spending time with us in this space where your too muchness is never too much. Remember, You're not broken, and you're definitely not alone. We're here to honor the complexity, celebrate the nuance, and walk this neurodivergent path together.
You might consider giving us a rating and a review on the platform you listen to podcasts. It gives others an opportunity to see our podcast and walk this path with us. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind to your nervous system, and stay unapologetically AuDHD. You belong here.